We wake up every day chasing something. Sometimes it's success, sometimes love, other times it's simply relief, a way to escape the weight that life quietly places on our shoulders. We convince ourselves that the next thing will do it. The next job, the next relationship, the next achievement, as if happiness is a finish line we haven't crossed yet. But have you ever stopped to wonder, what if happiness isn't out there waiting to be found? What if it's been here all along, quietly waiting for us to notice? There is a strange irony in how we live, surrounded by conveniences, flooded with information, armed with choices. Yet so many feel lost, unsatisfied, disconnected. We have more than any generation before us, and yet we ache with a sense of lack. We scroll through lives that look perfect and wonder why ours doesn't feel the same. We measure ourselves against illusions and come up short. And in this cycle, we hand our happiness to things outside of us, to people, to status, to moments that are always slipping away. But the human heart wasn't built to run this race. It wasn't meant to compete endlessly for worth, or to be at the mercy of external validation. The heart was meant to be still, to feel deeply, to recognize beauty in simplicity. Somewhere along the way, we forgot this. We were taught to chase, not to look inward, taught to accumulate, not to appreciate, taught to expect happiness to arrive like a reward at the end of suffering, rather than something we are capable of nurturing now, within. Aristotle, a man who lived over 2,000 years ago, spoke a truth so profound, it still echoes in the halls of philosophy today. Happiness depends upon ourselves. He wasn't talking about a shallow kind of happiness, not the fleeting joy that comes from praise or the temporary thrill of success. He meant eudaimonia, a deep, enduring sense of fulfillment that arises when we live in alignment with our values, when we act with purpose, when we take responsibility for our inner world. But responsibility is a heavy word. It asks us to stop blaming the world for how we feel. It asks us to stop waiting for someone else to come and fix the ache we carry. It requires courage, because it means the answer we're seeking won't come from the outside, but from the quiet, often uncomfortable space within. And this is where many people hesitate, because looking inward means confronting truths we've buried. It means acknowledging the ways we sabotage our own peace. It means realizing that maybe, just maybe, it's not the world that needs to change, but us. So we resist, we keep running, we fill our calendars. We are numb with distractions. We tell ourselves we'll be happy when the job is better, when we have more money, when the right person comes along. But happiness is not postponed. It doesn't live in future conditions. It lives in present choices. This doesn't mean we should stop striving or that ambition is wrong. It means we must stop depending on external outcomes to feel whole. Because when your happiness hinges on things you cannot control, you're building your house on sand. One shift in the tide and everything collapses. Think of a tree. It stands tall not because it chases the wind, but because its roots are deep. It bends with the storm but does not break. It grows not for applause, but because it is its nature to grow. What if we lived like that, rooted in our own sense of worth, unshaken by the noise around us, trusting that we already carry what we need? There is peace in that kind of living, a quiet strength that doesn't shout, but endures. When you stop outsourcing your joy, you begin to reclaim your life. You no longer wait for perfect conditions. You create them within. You stop blaming others for your emotional state. You begin to see that your response is your power. And suddenly, life becomes lighter. Not because it's easier, but because you're no longer fighting against it. This is not to say there won't be pain. Life will still challenge you. People will still disappoint you. There will be moments of grief, of confusion, of heartache. But when happiness is rooted in your own values and intentions, it becomes resilient. It doesn't disappear in hardship, it deepens. It becomes a quiet river beneath the noise, steady and sustaining. There is an old Buddhist teaching that says, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The difference lies in where we place our power. When we believe happiness is something that others control, we suffer. When we believe it is something we cultivate, we heal. So ask yourself, not what do I need to gain to be happy, but what do I need to release? What beliefs, what comparisons, what expectations have I clung to that no longer serve me? What have I assumed must happen before I allow myself peace? Because the truth is, you could lose everything tomorrow and still find happiness in the way the wind moves through the trees, in the way a child laughs, in the warmth of sunlight on your skin. These are not achievements, they are moments, and moments, when fully lived, become meaning. Happiness does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be present. It doesn't need you to be right. It needs you to be real. To show up to life not with demands, but with openness. To see what is already good, already working, already beautiful, and let that be enough. Maybe the real journey is not in becoming someone else, but in coming home to who you already are. And in that space, beneath the noise, beyond the striving, you may discover a quiet truth, that happiness was never lost. It was simply waiting for you to choose it, and this is where the lesson begins. Happiness, then, is not something we stumble upon by accident, nor is it a prize we are granted when we finally get everything right. It's a discipline, a way of seeing, a choice repeated moment by moment in the quiet corners of everyday life. But to truly understand this, why happiness depends upon ourselves, we must look deeper into the wisdom of those who saw life not through the lens of possession, but through the clarity of introspection. Take the words of the Stoics, who lived in ancient Rome, yet wrote as if they understood the ache of the modern soul. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of one of the most powerful empires in history, had access to everything: wealth, admiration, control. But in the solitude of his own thoughts, he returned again and again to the same truth. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, not the size of your empire, not the favor of others, but the landscape within your own mind. It's easy to overlook the significance of this idea because it doesn't shout. It doesn't dazzle like a luxury car or the applause of a crowd, but it endures because thoughts become habits. Habits become behavior, and behavior, over time, shapes the very texture of our lives. If our inner world is ruled by resentment, fear, and comparison, no external gain will quiet that chaos. We will carry the storm with us wherever we go. But the opposite is also true. When we cultivate inner peace, when we practice gratitude and develop compassion, we begin to anchor ourselves in something solid. We become less reactive, less entangled in the drama of things we cannot control. We learn to be present, to see clearly without the fog of ego or desire. In that space, happiness is no longer a visitor. It becomes a companion, and it's not only the Stoics who understood this. In ancient China, Laozi, the sage behind the Tao Te Ching, wrote, "If you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. The present, this moment, is the only place where happiness can truly exist." But most of us spend our days mentally elsewhere, chasing shadows and bracing for storms that may never come. So how do we return to ourselves? How do we make this present moment enough? The answer begins with awareness. Awareness of what we consume, through our minds, our hearts, our conversations. Awareness of the narratives we've inherited, that success must look a certain way, that love means losing yourself, that worth must be earned through endless achievement. These stories have shaped us, but they are not the truth, and the moment we start questioning them, we create space for something real. Happiness thrives in simplicity, in the soft ritual of morning light falling across your bed, in a kind word from a stranger, in knowing that you acted with integrity even when no one was watching. These are not things the world markets to us because they can't be bought, but they are the building blocks of a meaningful life. And here lies the power we each hold, to choose what we focus on, to choose the lens through which we interpret our experiences, to decide with intention where our energy goes. A setback can be seen as failure or as a teacher. Loneliness can be seen as emptiness or as an invitation to meet yourself. Even sorrow, when welcomed with open eyes, can soften you, expand you, shape you into someone more human. The Buddha once taught that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. This is not just a spiritual metaphor, it is a practical insight. Our thoughts are not passive. They ripple through our lives, influencing how we speak, how we love, how we suffer. And when we take responsibility for them, when we stop waiting for the world to deliver peace to our doorstep, something begins to shift. This shift doesn't happen all at once. It's not a sudden awakening, but a quiet, gradual unfolding. We begin to notice when we're caught in old patterns, blaming, resisting, grasping. We learn to pause, to breathe, to choose again. Slowly, we move from reaction to response, from chaos to clarity, from fear to acceptance. And in this unfolding, we find that happiness is not a loud celebration, but a soft presence. It's not perfection, it's alignment. When your actions reflect your values, when your words carry truth, when you treat others with kindness, not because it will be returned, but because it's who you are. There's a story of a traveler who asked a monk, "What is the path to happiness?" The monk smiled and replied, "First, you accept what is. Then you let go of what was. Finally, you trust in what will be." These three steps, acceptance, release, trust, form the rhythm of a joyful life. They are not easy, but they are simple. And simplicity, in its own quiet way, is profoundly powerful. Because once you stop placing your joy in the hands of others, once you stop waiting for the world to arrange itself perfectly, you begin to understand what Aristotle meant. You begin to live it. You wake up one day and realize your mood isn't dictated by your inbox. Your peace isn't shattered by someone else's opinion. Your self-worth isn't tangled in likes or validation. You are the author of your emotional life, and the pen has always been in your hand. And when you truly see that, when you feel it not just as an idea, but as an embodied truth, something liberates inside of you. You stop chasing happiness like a butterfly. You become the garden that attracts it naturally, through stillness, through intention, through love. And this is the lesson the world keeps whispering to us, again and again, in the quiet moments between our distractions. That joy is not somewhere out there. It is already here, waiting not to be found, but to be remembered. From here, we begin to reflect not only on this truth, but on the real work ahead. What does it mean to live as if happiness depends upon ourselves? How do we carry this wisdom into the messiness of life, into our relationships, into the uncertainty of tomorrow? That is where we go next. The moment we realize that happiness depends upon ourselves is the moment the world begins to look different. Not because the world changes, but because our relationship to it does. We begin to understand that we are not just passengers of life, but participants, shapers of experience, keepers of meaning, and yet, this understanding is not the end of the journey, it is only the threshold. Because knowing that we hold the key to our own happiness brings with it an even greater challenge, learning how to use it in a world that constantly tries to convince us otherwise. Life will test this truth, not in theory, but in the rawness of reality. You'll wake up one day and feel a weight pressing on your chest, not because something has gone terribly wrong, but because that's how the day begins sometimes. You'll scroll through someone else's highlight reel and feel a quiet sense of lack. You'll receive harsh words from someone you love and feel your heart shrink with doubt. And in those moments, the idea that happiness is a choice might feel distant, maybe even cruel. But this is where the real work begins, not in comfort, but in discomfort. Happiness, when we accept it as an internal responsibility, becomes an act of daily creation, a decision we make not once, but again and again, sometimes with trembling hands. It's not about forcing a smile or denying our pain. It's about remembering that even in the presence of pain, there is room for peace. Even in grief, there is space for grace. To live this way is not to float above life. It is to sink more deeply into it. To let go of the illusion that happiness means ease, and to embrace instead the profound contentment that arises from alignment, from knowing that we are living with integrity even when it's hard, that we are showing up honestly even when we feel vulnerable, that we are choosing presence even when the future calls to us with both fear and promise. Real happiness is not passive. It asks us to participate fully. It invites us to notice our thoughts, to tend to them as we would a garden, to pull the weeds of resentment and comparison before they take root, to water the seeds of kindness, patience, and perspective. And just like any garden, it requires consistency, not perfection, just the quiet willingness to care. There is a Japanese philosophy called wabi-sabi. It speaks to the beauty of imperfection, the acceptance of transience, a cracked bowl mended with gold, a faded flower honored for its delicate decay. What if we saw our lives the same way, not as broken when things don't go as planned, but as beautifully evolving? What if our scars were not signs of weakness, but places where light enters us? We often believe that happiness requires everything to be right. But sometimes it's the very act of being with what is, without needing it to change, that opens the door to joy. When we release the need to control every outcome, we discover the relief of surrender. When we stop clinging to what was, we create space for what is becoming. When we stop demanding that others complete us, we begin to see ourselves as already whole, and in that wholeness, something softens. We stop resisting the rhythm of life. We begin to trust its seasons. We understand that there will be moments of blooming and moments of falling apart, that both are sacred, that both belong, and through it all, we remain rooted, not in what we have, but in who we are choosing to be. This kind of happiness doesn't always look like laughter or light. Sometimes it looks like silence, like tears that flow without shame, like breathing deeply into the tension and choosing not to run, like sitting beside your pain without letting it define you. It's quiet, often invisible, but it's there, like a steady heartbeat beneath the chaos. And once you begin to touch it, even briefly, you start to see it everywhere. In the kindness of a stranger, in the stillness of early morning, in the relief of letting go, you realize that happiness is not a grand destination, but a collection of small, sacred moments. Moments that we miss when we are too busy looking elsewhere. Think of the times you felt most at peace. Were they marked by applause? Or were they simple? A walk alone at sunset, a deep conversation with someone who sees you, the quiet joy of knowing you've done the right thing, even when no one noticed. These are not random, they are clues, reminders of what matters, reminders of what endures. And yet, the world will keep pulling at you. It will tempt you with the promise of more success, more approval, more stuff. It will whisper that happiness lives on the other side of the next achievement. But you know better now. You've seen the hollowness of that chase. You've felt the fatigue of always trying to arrive. So now, you choose differently. You return to yourself again and again. You remember that your value is not tied to your productivity, that your worth is not measured by comparison, that your joy does not require permission. This is the reflection that transforms, not a thought, but a way of being, not a philosophy confined to books, but a practice lived in the ordinary. It is the quiet revolution of reclaiming your inner life, of building a home within yourself that the world cannot shake. And as you walk this path, you begin to radiate something different, a calmness, a confidence, not born of ego, but of self-trust. Others will feel it. Some may not understand it, but that's okay, because you are not here to impress. You are here to live deeply, to love honestly, to meet yourself fully. This is not a conclusion. It is a beginning, a return to what's real. And as we continue this journey together, there remains one final piece to explore, the closing thought, the final echo of this truth we've been unfolding. What remains when all else is stripped away? What lasting insight carries us forward into the noise, the beauty, the uncertainty of life? That is where we go next. And so, we arrive here, not at the end of the path, but at the point where insight becomes an invitation. After all the questioning, all the letting go, all the quiet revolutions within, we're left with a truth that doesn't shout, but whispers. A truth that isn't heavy, but humbling. That happiness was never something to chase. It was something to remember, something to return to. And in that return, we find ourselves not as someone new, but as someone more honest, more whole, more awake. When you begin to live with the understanding that happiness depends upon yourself, the world no longer feels like a battlefield of competition or a maze of unmet desires. It becomes a canvas, and your presence, how you show up to each moment, is the brush. You stop asking what you can get from life, and you begin asking what you can give. You realize that joy isn't something you wait for, it's something you extend. Through a kind word, a deep breath, a pause before reacting, a choice to forgive, a decision to grow. This is not naive optimism. It's not pretending that suffering doesn't exist. It's choosing to believe that suffering is not all there is. Life will break you, yes. It will humble you, stretch you, undo you. But it will also heal you, surprise you, open you. And in the contrast between those moments, in the tension between pain and beauty, you will discover your capacity to endure, to transform, and ultimately, to find peace. Happiness in this sense is not a mood. It is a way of holding life gently, with reverence. It is the space between reaction and response. It's waking up with gratitude for breath, even when the day ahead feels uncertain. It's letting go of things that no longer serve you, even if they once meant everything. It's saying, I am enough, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped measuring yourself against illusions. You begin to realize that nothing you chase will ever fill the place that only presence can. No title, no relationship, no number in a bank account. You could have it all and still feel empty if you are not at home within yourself. And you could have very little and still radiate peace if you are aligned with your values, if you are guided by something deeper than appearance. There is a reason the great teachers spoke in paradox. The more you seek happiness, the more elusive it becomes, but the more you let go of needing it, the more it flows freely. The less you grasp, the more you receive. The more you surrender, the more you reclaim. That is the quiet miracle of inner life. It does not demand attention. It does not require applause. It simply asks that you show up fully, just as you are, with courage and with heart. Maybe the measure of a meaningful life is not how much we accumulate, but how deeply we notice. How often we say thank you, how bravely we forgive, how gently we treat the parts of ourselves we once rejected, how patiently we hold space for others, even when they don't meet us the way we wish they would. Because, in the end, no one else can walk your path, no one else can carry your joy, and no one else can give you the permission to be at peace with your own soul. That is your work. That is your freedom. Happiness, then, is not a treasure to be found at the end of the journey. It is the way you walk, the grace in your step, the kindness in your voice, the integrity in your choices. It is the small decisions you make when no one is watching. It's the life you live when you are no longer performing. And yes, you will forget. You will slip into old habits. You will feel lost again, but that's okay, because happiness is not about never falling. It's about remembering that you can always return, that the way home is never closed, that within you is a stillness no storm can touch. This is the legacy of wisdom left by the sages, the thinkers, the hearts who lived before us. They did not promise a life free of suffering. They offered something more real, the reminder that in the very center of your being, there is something that cannot be taken, something that waits patiently beneath the noise, a quiet truth, a soft strength. And when you choose to live from that place, life begins to meet you differently, not because it changes, but because you do. You move through the world with a sense of enoughness, with a steadiness that doesn't need to shout, with a heart that knows it is already whole. So as you step forward, take this with you. Your happiness does not belong to the past you can't change or the future you can't control. It belongs to this moment, this breath, this choice. It belongs to you, not someday, but now. Let this be your reminder. Let this be your return to the power of your presence, to the wisdom of your own heart, to the truth that has always been waiting for you to remember. Happiness depends upon ourselves, and the moment you believe that, not just in your mind, but in the way you live, is the moment you begin to embody it fully, quietly, completely,